The movie begins with two officers named Dylan and Frank. They may be seen entering a building, most likely looking for someone inside. Just as they draw their firearms and approach the building's entrance, they hear a girl screaming. They swiftly whip out their torches and notice a female laying on the floor. They go on to properly inspect the building. This is when a man in a mask appears and immediately strikes Dylan. A battle breaks out between the two, which ends with Dylan beating the snot out of him and knocking him down. Meanwhile, we notice Frank is also on the floor, and Dylan immediately asks for backup. As he does so, the man in the mask strikes him once more, and this time, Frank has had enough, and he immediately kills him. The scene turns to Dylan and his wife, Brenner Baker, driving somewhere. This is when a man in a truck passes past. He says some unpleasant things about Brenner before overtaking the pair and driving aggressively. After a while, they stop at a cafe to refresh themselves, and while Dylan is in the restroom, his wife Brenner is outside, sitting at a table. This is when the same man from the truck appears and begins tormenting Brenner again. This time, he moves too close to her. Butch is a bully. Dylan emerges from the bathroom just as he is making derogatory remarks about the woman. Before things could get out of control, an older woman in the diner steps between the two men and pulls them away. She then tells the pair that people in that community aren't used to seeing couples like them, and she apologizes on Butch's behalf. Dylan expresses his thanks to the woman, but she encourages him to address her as Mama, as everyone else does. After eating at that restaurant, the couple drives on and finds a good spot in the woods to camp for the night. Just as they are settling in, a lady cop approaches Brenner and speaks to him. She informs her that the people in this area are strange and unwelcoming to outsiders, so they should exercise extreme caution if they intend to camp here. They thank the police for her caution, and once she has departed, the pair decides to continue hiking. As they go, Dylan asks his wife if they should go left or right. Brenner orders to head left, and as they move in that way, it begins to rain unexpectedly. They see a cottage nearby and decide to go inside to wait for the rain to cease. Because the weather is so lovely, the two end up having romance right inside the cabin, and Brenner begins looking around. When she travels to another chamber, she discovers a concealed compartment, which when opened reveals a large amount of ammunition. She flips out when she sees this. She immediately contacts Dylan and begs him to see what is out there. Dylan also becomes alarmed, and they decide it is best to leave right immediately. Just as they're about to go, Butch appears from behind and assaults them with the buttstock of his gun. The two are knocked unconscious, and the next thing we see is them tied up in a room, where Butch savagely tortures Dylan. They torment the man in front of his wife and mentally harass her as well. After then, one of Butch's men approaches him and informs him that the person he is torturing is a police officer. Butch freaks out for a moment before going inside. He admits to Dylan that he had no idea he was a police officer and expresses regret for what he has done. After that, he pulls out his gun and shoots them both. He then directs his soldiers to take care of the bodies, and they dig a large pit and place the bodies within. We then see a flashback to Brenner's training as an army officer. It is demonstrated that she is unlike any other ordinary woman. Following that, she has become an extremely powerful individual. We are transported back to the present, when we observe Brenner awaken after everyone has departed. It turns out that the bullet did not actually kill her. Instead, it brushed away, leaving her with a scratch large enough to bleed. After waking up, she immediately checks on her husband. She notices that he is dead and proceeds to hide his body with little branches. She returns to the camp they had established and mourns the tragic death of her spouse. She blames herself for her husband's death, recalling that she was the one who told him to go left, which was a mistake on their part. When she realizes who she really is, she intends to kill them all and avenge her husband's death. She immediately gets an axe and starts going. Meanwhile, we see Butch returning to Mama's apartment, where they are bullying a young woman. Butch proceeds to grab her from behind and kiss her against her will. Everyone out there is afraid of Butch and his crew. It comes out that they are the ones who kidnap those girls and exploit them for anything they want. This is when Mama arrives and instructs Butch to eat quickly because she has a job for him. Meanwhile, Brenner makes a highly sharp weapon out of wood and immediately kills one of Butch's soldiers. She is clearly unhappy about having to do all of this, though. After killing the man and caring for his body, she vanishes into the woods. After a while, she kills another man and then cuts one man's foot. She does not, however, kill him and instead watches as he pulls himself away to save his life from her. Brenner then starts a fire and destroys Butch's vital cabin, resulting in a big explosion. Then we see a man who is identified as Sheriff Hobbs. He has a rifle in his hand as he hears the explosion and attempts to find out what it is. Mama and Butch, on the other hand, can hear the explosion as well. Butch is alarmed when he notices smoke coming from a location near his cabin. Mama immediately tells Butch to check. Butch makes his way to the woodland and discovers his injured friend, who has been assaulted by Brenner. He immediately puts him in his truck and drives away. We then observe Brenner laying in the back of his pickup. When Butch returns to Mama, he delivers the dreadful news: some of their men have been killed. Mama is quite upset with Butch. She goes on to tell him off and even slaps him for getting himself into such a predicament. She then tells him to go find whoever is out there right away. Mama actually has a complete network and setup. She goes to one of her nerdy men and asks him to look up the woman's profile. The man looks her up, and Mama is astonished to hear that Brenner is no ordinary woman who has served in the army. Meanwhile, Sheriff Hobbs travels into the woods, discovers the dead body of one of Butch's men, and immediately connects to the control room. He tells them about the dead body outside. Brenner, on the other hand, begins making preparations in the forest. She then proceeds to lay traps for anyone who may be lurking in the vicinity. Hobbs' men, on the other hand, come at the area where he discovered the dead body and inform the sheriff that this is one of Mama's men. He goes on to say that Mama controls the entire forest, and everything that happens here is done on her commands. Sheriff says he wants to meet this Mama right away. On the other side, the girl working in the control room informs Mama that Sheriff Hobbs is on his way to see her. It turns out that this woman is also on Mama's payroll, so the sheriff and 3 of his men go to meet Mama and inform her of the dead body they discovered in the forest. Mama doesn't tell them about her people getting into problems out in the jungle. She even plays the victim, claiming that someone is attacking her men. She goes on to add that the man they found had just committed suicide. The sheriff is perfectly aware that what she is saying is all bullshit, but he says nothing else and goes with his men. Mama and her boys cried that night over their friend's death. They become intoxicated and then fall asleep right there. Butch wakes up, but he's too hungover. He steps inside, where Brenner is already waiting. She immediately slits his throat, avenging her husband. She watches as he strains to breathe and ultimately dies. The following morning, Brenner is still hiding when one of Mama's men brings a girl into a room and locks her up. Brenner notices that this is not the only girl in there. They have also imprisoned numerous other girls. Brenner feels awful for the girls and decides to help them get out. She sneaks into the room and sets the females free. The females are too terrified to go, and one of them screams, alerting one armed man, who begins shooting at them. One of them is hit and dies before Brenner demonstrates her unmatched abilities and kills that man in style. Brenner then heads to the forest with a girl named Emily. Mama, on the other hand, hears of Butch's death and the daughter's escape. Mama is completely shocked to learn of her son's death. Mama loses it. She orders her guys to find the woman and bring her inside. She instructs them to prepare all of her men and dogs to begin searching for the woman. Back in the forest, one of Mama's men finds Brenner's refuge, but is slain by a trap prepared by Brenner. Another appears, and Brenner immediately shoots him. Later that night, Brenner and Emily sit together. They speak and have a good time together. Emily informs her that she is pregnant, but also expresses her fear. She knows Mama is going to catch her, and God knows what she is going to do to her, but Brenner tells her she will protect her. Hunk, Mama's personal man, however, travels to the forest with his hounds in search of Brenner. The next morning, they catch Emily, but Brenner arrives on time and kills them. Meanwhile, Sheriff Hobbs also arrives. One of Hunk's men shoots Hobbs in the leg, but Brenner spots him and kills him. Brenner and Emily then get Hobbs to a secure location, and Brenner informs Sheriff that they will need to distract them, otherwise, they will continue to appear in this one location, making it more difficult to deal with them. They then decide to leave this refuge. Emily and Brenner travel along the creek and come across the same lady cop, who cautions Brenner and her husband about the area. They approach her for assistance, and she advises them to get into her car. They are weary, so they fall asleep immediately. However, as they wake up, they are besieged by Mama and her soldiers. It turns out that the lady officer has always worked on Mama's payroll. They begin torturing them, and Emily informs Mama that she is pregnant with Butch's child. When Mama hears this, she orders her guy to take her to another room. Brenner, on the other hand, is tied up in a chamber and waiting to be tormented. Emily, in the meantime, offers food but kills the man guarding Brenner. She quickly untied her. Brenner then enters the room where all of Mama's men are assembled. The struggle erupts, and Brenner begins killing them one by one. Mama, in the meantime, places a knife around Emily's neck and orders Brenner to drop her firearm. During the standoff, a man strikes Brenner from behind, and Mama cuts Emily's throat before fleeing. Brenner kills the man, but Emily is already dead when she arrives. The scenario changes to 3 months later, when Mama is seated in her garden and receives a message from Judgment Day Bitch. Just then, Mama is shot in the head, and we see Brenner hiding in the trees. Brenner leaves after avenging her husband, and the film concludes.